When I first arrived at the new prison, it was unlike anything I had ever seen. My transfer had been sudden, almost too quick to process. The guards didn't offer much explanation, just enough to make it clear that I was being sent somewhere more appropriate for my behavior. They led me off the bus, their faces blank and distant, as if avoiding eye contact would shield them from the weight of whatever this place was. The isolation was immediately overwhelming. The prison loomed in front of me like a beast, its thick stone walls almost seeming to breathe in the cold, damp air. No sound came from inside, and the sky above was permanently veiled in a layer of dark clouds, giving the whole area an eerie, timeless quality. As they took me deeper into the compound, the guards remained eerily silent, communicating only in clipped, hollow commands. My stomach churned uneasily, a growing knot of dread tightening with each step. When we finally reached my cell, I could feel something in the air shift, a sense of being watched by unseen eyes. One of the guards handed me a thin piece of paper, his hand trembling slightly as it brushed against mine. "Read it," he muttered, avoiding my gaze before they all turned and disappeared down the hall without another word. I stood there, in front of the heavy iron door of my cell, alone, the paper clutched in my hand like some twisted instruction manual. Inside, the cell was cold and smelled faintly of mold. It wasn't much different from what I had experienced before. Cramped with a small window, a metal bed frame bolted to the floor, and a bare toilet in the corner. But something about this place was wrong. The silence, the darkness, it clung to me, made my skin crawl. Sitting on the bed, I unfolded the paper, the yellowed corners crackling. My eyes skimmed over the words, each rule seeping into my mind like poison. 1. Occasionally, you will hear a loud crash echo through the prison, followed by a low, eerie hum. You must remain perfectly silent until the hum fades completely. If you make any noise, no matter how small, a figure with no eyes and a stitched-shut mouth will appear at your door. It won't enter immediately, but if it hears you again after the first warning, it will come inside and take something from you. A finger, a toe, or something much worse. My breath caught in my throat as I read that. No eyes? Stitched mouth? It seemed absurd, but something in the pit of my stomach told me this was more than just a cruel joke. I moved on to the second rule. 2. If you ever hear a distant siren blaring outside the prison at an unusual time, quickly cover your head and hide under your blanket until it stops. The siren is a warning that something has entered the prison grounds, something that isn't human. If you're not hidden when it arrives, you'll feel its presence move through your cell, brushing against your skin with icy fingers. But when you open your eyes, no one will be there. However, in the days that follow, you'll start losing your sense of self, as if someone else is slowly taking control of your thoughts, and eventually your body. My fingers trembled as I gripped the paper tighter, my mind racing. What the hell was this place? Why was I sent here? But I didn't have time to dwell on those questions as I kept reading. 3. If the guards ever warn of an incoming storm, you must keep your window covered until it passes. The storm isn't natural, and through the flashes of lightning, you'll see faces pressing against the glass. These aren't prisoners. If you make eye contact with them, they'll know you've seen them, and the next time the storm comes, they'll be waiting inside your cell. 4. Every Wednesday evening, after dinner, you'll hear a faint rattling noise under your bed. You must quickly sit on your bed with both feet off the floor until the sound stops. If your feet touch the ground, something cold will grab you and try to pull you under. If it succeeds, you won't disappear, but you'll never be the same, your face forever locked in an expression of terror, as if you've seen something no one should ever witness. 5. Once a month, during the full moon, you'll see a pale hand reach out from the vent in your cell, clawing its way down. You must offer it something, a personal item, a piece of clothing, even a scrap of food. If you fail to give it anything, by the next morning the hand will be gone, but it will have taken something from you. A memory, a sense, or worse, a part of your body. 6. Once a week, there will be a power outage for 3 minutes. In the darkness, you'll hear footsteps and whispers growing closer. You must find and keep hold of a small object, anything that fits in your hand, before the lights come back on. If you don't, when the lights return, you'll be gone. The rules were almost too much to take in. I sat there, numb, my mind reeling, trying to process the madness of it all. But this place, the thick silence, the oppressive weight of the air, it was suffocating, and I couldn't help but feel that these rules weren't just some bizarre form of psychological torture. They were real. As the first few days passed, I tried to keep my head down, not wanting to draw any unnecessary attention to myself. The other prisoners, those I could see or hear from the distance, seemed hollow, like they had been drained of life. They barely spoke, their eyes dull, bodies moving sluggishly like they were trapped in a trance. Something had broken them, and I feared it was only a matter of time before I'd meet the same fate. I spent my time nervously checking the small window, expecting some strange storm to roll in, or my ears straining for the first sound of a siren. But for the most part, the days blurred together in a haze of paranoia and silence. That silence didn't last forever, though. On the third night, just as I was lying down to try and sleep, a deafening crash shook the prison walls. I shot up in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound was like nothing I had ever heard before. Metal clanging against metal, echoing down the empty hallways, and then came the hum. Low, droning, almost like a distant chant. It filled the air, vibrating deep in my bones. I pressed my back against the wall, my hands instinctively clamping over my mouth to stop any sound from escaping. The hum lingered, growing louder for what felt like an eternity. My muscles screamed at me to move, to do something, but I stayed perfectly still. It wasn't until I thought I couldn't bear it any longer that the hum finally started to fade, slowly, agonizingly. The second it was gone, I exhaled shakily, my entire body trembling. But just as I started to calm down, I saw it. At the door, standing impossibly still, was the figure from the rule. No eyes, no expression, just a stitched-shut mouth stretched unnaturally wide across its face. It was waiting, standing motionless, but I knew what it was waiting for. A sound. I stayed silent, my breath shallow, but I didn't dare move. Eventually, after what felt like hours, the figure finally disappeared, leaving me alone in the oppressive quiet. My nerves were completely shot after that, but I knew the worst wasn't over. The rules weren't going to stop just because I survived one encounter. The following night, as I tried to fall asleep, the faintest sound caught my ear, a distant, wailing siren. My blood ran cold. Without hesitation, I pulled the blanket over my head, curling into myself and gripping the sheets like my life depended on it. My pulse pounded in my ears as the siren grew louder, closer, until it was almost deafening. My body was paralyzed, but I could feel it. Something was in the room with me, moving slowly through the dark, its presence like an icy chill crawling across my skin. It brushed against me, its touch sending shivers down my spine, but I kept my eyes squeezed shut, refusing to look. The minutes dragged on, stretching into an unbearable eternity until the siren finally stopped. When I dared to peek out from under the blanket, nothing seemed out of place, but a gnawing feeling deep inside told me I wasn't alone. The next morning, my mind felt foggy, disjointed, like I couldn't quite focus on anything for too long. I kept catching myself thinking thoughts that didn't feel like mine, thoughts that weren't quite right. As the days passed, that sense of wrongness only grew, and I found myself questioning what was real and what wasn't. Was I losing my mind, or was something else, something far worse, taking hold of me? Weeks passed like this, each day blending into the next as I tried to navigate the twisted rules that govern this place. The Wednesday evening rule came and went. I had almost forgotten it until I heard the faint rattling under my bed. My heart leaped into my throat, and I scrambled onto the mattress, pulling my feet up just as something cold and clammy brushed against my ankle. My body shook with fear as the rattling grew louder, the unseen thing under my bed becoming more frantic in its attempts to reach me. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the sound, until it finally faded into silence, my heart racing from the dread of what could have happened had I not followed the rule. But the experience left a gnawing sense of unease deep in my gut, and as the days dragged on in this hellhole of isolation, I found myself looking over my shoulder at every shadow, haunted by the idea that something was lurking just beyond my vision, waiting for its moment to strike. It wasn't long before the atmosphere in the prison grew thicker with tension, and I soon learned that the rules were not just guidelines. They were lifelines. One afternoon in the lunch area, I noticed a commotion at the far end of the room. Several inmates were gathered around a table, their faces pale and strained. Curiosity got the better of me, and as I made my way closer, I heard whispers about a distant siren that had blared moments before, sending shivers down my spine. I quickly recalled the warning about hiding under my blanket, and a surge of panic coursed through me. I glanced around the room, feeling the icy fingers of dread wrap around my neck, and I remembered how important it was to remain hidden. In a sudden rush, I turned and hurried back to my cell, the murmur of fear in the lunch area fading behind me. I reached my cell just in time to throw myself under the thin blanket covering my bed, pulling it tightly around me as if it could shield me from whatever had entered the prison. The air around me felt charged, electric with an unspeakable terror as I tried to control my breathing, every second stretching on into an eternity until the siren finally stopped. I opened my eyes cautiously, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a cold breath against my neck, but when I turned, nothing was there. Only the oppressive silence that seemed to laugh at my fears. Days blended into nights, and each evening brought with it a new level of anxiety as I awaited the faint rattling sound that signaled the Wednesday night rule. Each time I heard it, I would leap onto my bed, hoisting my feet up just in time, my heart pounding, but the fear of what lay beneath my bed gnawed at my sanity, an ever-present shadow looming over me. I could hardly focus on anything else, even during the showers when the chill of the water couldn't wash away the tension that clung to me like a second skin. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced across the tile floor, and one night, I thought I heard a soft whisper echo through the steam, a voice so close it felt as if it were right behind me. I spun around, my heart racing, but again, I was met only with silence and the steady drip of water from the faucets. My nerves were frayed, and I found myself avoiding the showers altogether, fearing that the voice I heard might belong to something far worse than my imagination could conjure. Then, there was the storm warning that spread through the prison like wildfire. I quickly secured my window, the claps of thunder rumbling ominously outside, and as the flashes of lightning illuminated my cell, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching me from beyond the glass. I dared not look, knowing what it meant to make contact. So I huddled in the corner of my cell, my heart hammering in my chest as the storm raged outside, every crash of thunder echoing like a warning from another world. But even in my dread, I felt an overwhelming curiosity about what would happen if I did look, and I could feel the pressure building within me, the temptation clawing at my sanity as I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, just wanting to see if there really were faces out there waiting for me. My resolve was tested as I recalled the rule, the thought of those haunting gazes frozen in my mind. The next few nights were a blur of terrifying encounters, like the night I was jolted awake by a loud crash echoing through the cell block, the eerie hum following closely behind. I remembered the first rule, yet I was so terrified that I barely contained a whimper. I froze in place, straining to hear any sign of movement. I heard something scrape against the door. It sounded almost human yet was so wrong, and I gripped the edges of my bed tightly as if it could keep me anchored in reality. The noise faded into the distance, and I exhaled slowly, relieved I hadn't broken the silence. But the sense of dread continued to loom over me like a thick fog. I found it harder to distinguish between nightmares and reality as time passed, my grip on sanity thinning with each chilling encounter. I was desperate to escape the horrors, but the walls of the prison only seemed to tighten around me, trapping me within their sinister embrace. It became a game of survival, each day a new test as I grappled with my deteriorating mental state. Each rule loomed over me, and one night, as the full moon hung high in the sky, I sat on my bed, restless, staring at the vent in the corner of my cell. When I noticed the pale hand beginning to claw its way down, panic surged through me. The warning echoed in my mind, and I frantically searched for something to offer it. My heart raced as I rummaged through my meager belongings, finally settling on a scrap of food I had saved. As I carefully offered it, I felt the chill radiating from that hand, and the moment I relinquished my offering, it disappeared into the darkness, leaving me shaken yet oddly relieved, knowing I had done what was necessary to keep whatever it was at bay. But the haunting feeling that something was watching me lingered long after the hand vanished. Then came the weekly power outage, which struck without warning one fateful evening, plunging me into darkness. I scrambled to find something to hold on to as whispers swirled around me, growing closer, brushing against my skin like icy tendrils. I clutched a small metal object I had managed to find in the shadows, my heart racing as the sound of footsteps drew nearer. I could feel them getting closer, my breath hitching in my throat as I silently pleaded for the lights to come back on, terrified of what might happen if I didn't hold on tightly enough. Just as the darkness became almost unbearable, the lights flickered back to life, illuminating my cell, and I breathed a sigh of relief, feeling a sense of victory in that moment. However, the taste of victory quickly soured when I noticed the cell across from mine was empty, the familiar face of my neighbor having vanished without a trace. A gnawing sense of dread settled in my stomach, and as the days continued, it became painfully clear that the prison was consuming its occupants one by one, leaving only terror in its wake. I knew I had to remain vigilant. My survival depended on my ability to navigate this twisted game, but the psychological toll was becoming too much to bear, and the lines between my past and the present began to blur, making me question what was real and what was just a figment of this hellish place. The oppressive silence was broken by the intermittent sounds of chaos. Crashes, screams, whispers. Every noise a reminder that I was not alone, that something dark lurked just outside the veil of sanity. In this twisted reality, I learned that every choice had dire consequences, and as I followed the rules laid out before me, I clung to the fragile hope that I might find a way out of this living nightmare. Yet deep down, I knew that each day could be my last. The unease in my stomach churned like a stormy sea, and the prison's oppressive silence only served to heighten my anxiety as I realized that the power outage was approaching again. My heart raced as I scanned my meager possessions, desperately searching for something small enough to grip in my hand. The minutes felt like hours, and I could already sense the darkness creeping in, the anticipation of the blackout making my palms sweat as I rifled through my few belongings, panic rising in my throat as the overhead lights flickered ominously, warning me of the impending doom. I remembered the chilling whispers that had filled the air the last time the lights had gone out, a cacophony of voices promising terror, and as the lights finally cut out, plunging me into pitch blackness, I felt a cold grip of fear clawing at my chest. I could hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing through the darkness, drawing nearer, the whispers now rising to a cacophony of sinister laughter that sent chills racing down my spine. My fingers trembled as I desperately fumbled around in the dark, trying to recall the exact shape and texture of anything I could use to stave off the encroaching dread. But my surroundings were a maze of confusion and shadows. The whispers grew louder, surrounding me, and just as I felt a rush of cold air sweep through the cell, making the hair on the back of my neck stand on end, I spotted a glimmer in the corner. A small metal shard from the broken mirror I had carelessly tossed aside days earlier. I lunged for it, my heart pounding as I wrapped my fingers around the cold metal, the weight of it grounding me as I felt the darkness thicken around me like a suffocating shroud. The footsteps stopped just outside my cell, the whispers morphing into a low, growling hum, and I pressed my back against the wall, trying to steady my breathing as the fear of not being able to find something to hold on to had almost paralyzed me. Just as the whispering voices seemed to converge on my very thoughts, the lights flickered back on, illuminating my cell, and I nearly collapsed with relief, clutching the shard tightly in my palm, but that relief was short-lived. I glanced at the opposite cell where my neighbor had vanished, and my heart sank when I saw a shadow lingering at the edge of the corridor, a figure barely discernible in the bright light yet undeniably present, its features hidden, just as the air grew thick with an unshakable sense of dread. I knew I was not alone, and as the figure retreated into the shadows, I felt a sinister connection. Something dark and malevolent that seemed to be toying with me, its intent inscrutable yet ominously clear. Days slipped by in a blur of fear and desperation, and as the full moon loomed once more, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the vent, bracing myself for the inevitable appearance of that pale, clawing hand. I gathered my thoughts, recalling the stories of those who had failed to provide an offering, the horror tales echoing in my mind. When the time finally came, I felt a sense of impending doom wash over me, and as I anxiously searched through my meager belongings, nothing seemed worthy enough to offer. My heart raced, and I could feel the weight of the prison's oppressive presence pressing down on me, suffocating my thoughts. Just as I was about to give up, I noticed a worn piece of cloth hanging from the edge of my blanket, a tattered remnant of a shirt I had long discarded, and with a surge of desperation, I tore it free, holding it tightly in my trembling hands as the ghostly hand began to claw its way down from the vent, its pale fingers reaching out, beckoning me closer. I could feel the chill emanating from the opening, a bitter cold that seemed to sap the warmth from the very air around me, and as the fingers scraped against the vent's edge, I hesitated, doubt clawing at my resolve, fearing that the moment I failed to offer anything, the consequences would be devastating. My heart raced as I finally extended the tattered cloth towards the vent, my breath hitching in my throat as the ghostly hand wrapped around it with a chilling grip, pulling it in as I stumbled back, half expecting the darkness to swallow me whole, the knowledge that I had nearly failed making my stomach churn with dread. But as the hand disappeared, leaving only silence in its wake, I felt a momentary relief wash over me, though it was quickly shadowed by the unsettling realization that whatever darkness lingered in this prison was still watching, still waiting for my next misstep. And I understood that my struggles were far from over, every moment a battle against the overwhelming tide of terror that threatened to consume me. The shadows grew longer in my cell, and with each passing day, the unshakable sense of dread settled deeper into my bones, like a chilling whisper that never seemed to fade, reminding me that I was ensnared in a nightmare with no clear path to escape, and the realization that I was slowly losing my grip on reality hung heavy in the air, twisting my thoughts into a web of confusion as I braced myself for whatever horrors awaited me next in this relentless cycle of terror. Days morphed into a haze of unease as I navigated the twisted corridors of the isolated prison, the oppressive air thick with dread, each echo of my footsteps a reminder of my fragile existence amidst the madness that surrounded me. I often found myself peering through the small barred window of my cell, a constant reminder of the world outside that felt as distant as a fading dream. And with every passing moment, the eerie stillness of the prison seemed to seep deeper into my bones, eroding my sanity. I was caught in a relentless cycle, forever waiting for the next rule to strike, each one more bizarre than the last. And as I lay on my thin mattress one night, a chilling realization settled over me. There was something beneath the prison itself, something ancient that whispered through the cracks of the foundation like a long-forgotten secret waiting to be unearthed. I had started to hear strange sounds coming from the depths of the building, like the scratching of claws against stone, the faint echo of voices whispering my name, taunting me from the shadows, and I was haunted by the belief that the prison wasn't just a cage but a living entity, a creature of sorts, feeding off the fear of those imprisoned within its walls. One fateful night, as I lay in bed, a deep rumbling sound reverberated through the corridors, like the growl of a slumbering beast awakening, and I could feel the vibrations beneath me, a pulse of dread that thrummed in time with my racing heart. The lights flickered overhead, plunging me into a brief darkness before they illuminated the cell again, and it was then that I saw it. Something moving just beyond my door, a dark silhouette slinking through the narrow corridor, and I was paralyzed with terror, knowing that this was no ordinary prison creature but something far worse, a manifestation of every unspeakable horror I had endured since my arrival. It paused outside my cell, and as I dared to peer through the narrow bars, I was met with a pair of glowing eyes staring back at me, reflecting the very depths of despair and anguish, and a cold wave of terror washed over me as I realized that it was studying me, as if weighing my worth, and the thought sent chills racing through my spine. The creature, whatever it was, seemed to revel in my fear, and as I heard the low rumble of its laughter echoing in the dark, I clutched my blanket tighter, trying to drown out the sound that was burrowing into my mind, taunting me with the horrors that awaited if I failed to adhere to the rules that governed this place. The thing, whatever it was, crept away, taking away the tension of the air with it. Time blurred in a cruel fashion, each day passing with a sense of impending doom, and I began to see the other prisoners changing, their faces becoming gaunt and hollow, shadows of their former selves, and I realized that I was slowly losing my grip on reality, teetering on the brink of despair as the darkness encroached. The boundaries of sanity began to fray, and I found myself questioning every sound, every flicker of light, wondering if I was truly alone or if the very essence of the prison had woven itself into my soul, leaving me forever marked by its sinister presence. I had learned that my survival hinged not just on following the rules, but on holding on to my sanity amidst the chaos. And every day became a test of my resolve, a battle against the overwhelming tide of fear that threatened to pull me under. As I stood by the window, watching the sun rise over the desolate landscape outside, I realized that this was my existence now, an endless cycle of terror and dread, where hope flickered like a dying candle, and every moment was a reminder of the darkness lurking just beyond my reach. Each day was a struggle, a constant reminder of the rules I had to obey, the lurking horrors that waited in the shadows, and as I took a deep breath, steeling myself for another day of survival, I understood that I had to cling to the hope that someday I would be released from this nightmare. Every day is a test for me and everyone in this prison. I just have to cling onto these rules until I can be released.